they should know that they have such a weighty responsibility on their shoulders, and they must exercise it without necessarily animating or taking this country backwards.
All right, thanks very much. Martin Olo, who's a lawyer and political analyst, joining us from Kakamega, discussing this issue of attempts to reform or rather amend Kenya's constitution. So I want us to just take a look at some of those numbers and explain to you how the IEBC claims to have arrived at the decision that they did regarding the validity of the signatures. And then we can speak to Tom Namwamba in just a moment. But this is what the IEBC said they did when they carried out an analysis of those signatures that were presented by Okoa Kenya. Well, they talked about, first of all, the total number of records that were captured. On this, they agree with CORD. CORD presented 1,633,577 signatures. So IEBC says they went through step one, which was to remove the records with ID numbers, but no signatures. Those were 85,647. Then they went ahead to say, okay, let's take a look at the records that are remaining. They removed those that had signatures, but no ID numbers. And then it went on and on. There were others that were blank records, that's at 9,556. And then there were others that had neither ID numbers or passport numbers or signatures at all. So these were the ones that were removed that you can see there. And then after that, they said they now went on to do a qualitative analysis of the numbers that were left. And at this point, during the qualitative analysis, they removed invalid records, such as misspelled IDs or names on the ID, incorrect passport numbers. And these were facts that could not be corrected on the face of it. And I'm quoting that report that was given by Kenya's Electoral Commission in this respect. Then they went ahead to remove unmatched records, taking a look now at the IEBC voter register and to see who's there and who's not there. Remove those records that had repetitions. They did their further analysis, and this is what they came up with. They said the total number of records that were treated as invalid was 741,979. If you deduct that from the initial figure we showed you of over 1.6 million, we will now get to the next page where we show you the total number that they treated as valid registered voters that were matching in ID or passport numbers and signatures. That final number is 891,598. This falls short of the constitutional requirement for a popular initiative to amend the constitution as at 1 million signatures. So let's talk a little bit more about this. And we're now joined by Tom Namwamba, who's a political analyst. He joins us on phone for more analysis on this. Tom, good evening and thanks for joining us. So let's talk about what this means for the image of IEBC. It hasn't been good prior to this, and now CORD is crying foul over it. How much does this affect the IEBC's reputation?
Thank you very much, the presenter. I want to say two things before I comment on the question. The first thing I want to say is that both IEBC and the government are setting a wrong precedent for this country. A precedent that is inciting, it can incite people, and a precedent that can make people angry, and a precedent that does not respect the right of people to pass. IEBC had an opportunity. IEBC had an opportunity before verifying these votes to include the petition, because the complainant was the court, and they could not proceed to verify the number of the people without a representative from the complainant. If court was represented and they found an anomaly in the lists that were presented, then that could be substantial. Secondly, IEBC is actually throat-thumping. Throat-thumping in the context that the authors of IEBC, they are not addressing the issue at hand. They are either intimidating the people who signed the petition and threatening that if people don't find them workable, they can send them home, that they have done their job. And this is not a good precedence and a good approach in administration. And the third thing that I want to say is that we cannot use threats, we cannot use intimidation, we cannot use manipulation, we cannot use favor to determine the destiny of this country. Our constitution is very clear, like my very good friend Martin Olo has actually said. We have the IEBC should have consulted with the complainant. The IEBC would have involved. You do not, if I am accused in court, you do not call me to tell me about the sentence. You involve me in the process of certifying that I'm culpable and I'm a criminal and I ought to be sentenced to a sentence that is worth you determining. But for you to give statistics of the method you used without involving me, who is the complainant, that definitely diffuses and waters down the credibility of IEBC. And IEBC is again and again, every time, trying to show the Kenyans that it is incompetent, it is not ready for work, and it is not up to the task.
Okay, Tom.
2017 election.
All right, Tom, you're talking about threats, but some say that is exactly what the Code Coalition is doing to IEBC. The threat now of total disbandment. We know Code is going for a massive rally in Malindi Thursday. And some say that, in fact, the threats are coming from the Code Coalition in terms of disbandment. So I'd like you to comment on that. And also, whether their calls to disband the IEBC are actually possible, considering Code's numbers in the National Assembly.
You know, CORD is not threatening. CORD is reacting to a precedent that has been set by IEBC. You remember the time, the Margayas and whoever, the Honorable for example, security. There was a time the chief was told about something, and he said, as a minister of government, if you rattle a snake, do what? Beaten. Now, what the government and IEBC is doing is to rattle the Kenyan people who owns this country. A government is, the people in government are given the mandate to administer and occupy instruments and institutions of the state to govern for a particular time on behalf of the people. And if you are against the people who have given you that mandate, you are a mistake that has followed.
Okay, Tom, we seem to be having a problem with the phone connection with you. We will try and rectify that and get back to you. Apologies for that poor connection with the phone. We're speaking to Tom Namamba, political analyst, on the latest regarding the Okoa Kenya initiative to amend Kenya's constitution. We now want to move on to other stories making headlines here on Bottomline East Africa, and that is regarding the situation in Burundi. New figures from the UN indicate that 474 people have been killed in Burundi since last April, when a crisis broke out over President Pierre Nkurunziza's decision to run for a third term. Experts presented their findings from a visit to Burundi earlier this month at the UN Council for Human Rights in Geneva. But the leader of a Burundi human rights organization said that the number of victims, in fact, exceeded 600. Meanwhile, a senior Burundi army officer and ally of the president was shot dead in the Defense Ministry compound on Tuesday, the latest in a series of killings in an almost year-long crisis that risks plunging the nation back into war. Lieutenant Colonel Darius Ikurakure was shot by an assassin dressed in a military uniform. Tit-for-tat killings of pro-government and opposition figures have prompted international concerns that Burundi, which emerged from an ethnically charged civil war a decade ago, could slide back into conflict. Army spokesman Major Clement Simana said in a statement that the suspect escaped after committing the crime, but a weapon had been recovered. He called for unity in the army. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon condemned the killing, saying, quote, "Such acts of violence risk exacerbating the crisis in Burundi." Ban reiterated his appeal for Burundians to resolve their differences peacefully and to engage in an inclusive and transparent political dialogue. Ikurakure was a commander of a combat engineering battalion based in Muzinda, northeast of the capital, Bujumbura. He was seen as a close ally to Nkurunziza, with whom he fought as a rebel during the civil war that ended in 2005. Now, official preliminary results show Benin businessman Patrice Talon has been declared winner of a presidential runoff. His only challenger, Prime Minister Lionel Zinsou, conceded defeat earlier. Mr. Talon got 65% of the votes, while Mr. Zinsou secured 35%. In Congo, the Independent National Electoral Commission has announced that incumbent President Denis Sassou Nguesso has taken a 67% lead in votes counted so far from the March 20th polls. Elsewhere in Niger, Mamadou Issoufou has been re-elected as his main opponent remains in France, seeking medical treatment after being jailed for several months. Zinzi Kibiku has more on this and other results from the continent in elections that have now been dubbed Africa's Super Sunday.
Crucial elections ranging from presidential to parliamentary and a referendum on presidential term limits. While Senegal held a historic referendum on reducing presidential terms from 7 to 5, Benin and Niger voted in presidential runoffs, and in Zanzibar it was a rerun of last October's polls which were cancelled. Voters are patiently waiting in the Republic of Congo, but information is scarce as the government has blocked all phone and internet use in the country. President Denis Sassou Nguesso is widely expected to win another term in office. This election was the very first of its kind under the new constitution, and the opposition is already denouncing the lack of transparency in the electoral process. President Denis Sassou Nguesso is seeking to renew his presidential mandate after ruling the country for over 3 decades. A total of 9 candidates contested the presidency of the country, with a population of about 4.5 million people. Back in Zanzibar, security was tight after violent protests of a recent election. The opposition Civic United Front had urged its supporters to boycott the poll. October's election was cancelled after Civic United Front candidate Saif Sharif Ahmad declared himself the winner before results were officially announced. The opposition party said the termination was because it had won, while the Electoral Commission said there had been widespread fraud. The incumbent President Mohamed Ali Shein of Tanzania's ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi CCM party has retained the seat with 90% of the vote rerun in a poll that was boycotted by the opposition. In Senegal, turnout was low for the controversial referendum. The new constitution that was voted in Senegal would cut the presidential mandate from 7 to 5 years and would not allow a president to run for more than 2 consecutive terms in office. It may serve to boost Senegal's image abroad as a strong democracy, but locally, the referendum has prompted some criticism. The new constitution proposes 14 other changes, including the opposition leader will have a status recognized by the constitution and will enjoy official benefits, local councils to get more power, and new rights for citizens such as a healthy environment and over natural resources and land ownership. Still in West Africa, Cape Verdeans went to the poll on Sunday to vote in parliamentary elections. The main opposition Movement for Democracy party won the election, taking back power after 15 years. Movement for Democracy had 53.7% versus 37% for the former ruling African Party for the independence of Cape Verde. The ruling party had controlled parliament for the past decade and a half, but struggled in municipal elections in 2012. They have come under attack for running up the public debt on expensive infrastructure projects and failing to tackle rampant youth unemployment. Zinzi Kibiku, KTN News.
Malaysia said on Tuesday it will send a team to retrieve a piece of debris found along the southern coast of South Africa to check whether it could belong to missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. A Malaysian Transport Ministry official said the wreckage discovered near the town of Mossel Bay on Tuesday could be from, quote, an inlet cowling of an aircraft engine based on early reports. Malaysia said further examination was required to verify if the debris belonged to MH370. The flight disappeared with 239 passengers and crew on board shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing. A piece of the plane washed up on the French island of Reunion in July 2015, but no further trace has been found. Debris found earlier this month off the southeast African coast arrived in Australia for testing on Monday. You're watching Bottomline East Africa right here on KTN News, where you get the whole story. We thank you for staying with us. We want to take a short break. When we come back,